How to Cook Well with Rory O'Connell. Proudly sponsored by Kerrygold.
I love cooking and I love teaching people how to cook. Good food is so important, not just for our health, but for our temperament, and it doesn't need to be complicated. For this series, I've created a set of menus which I hope you will try, either as individual dishes or as a complete and balanced meal. We're so lucky to have some of the best raw ingredients in the world. Let's make the most of them. Soups come in many styles and flavours, and the kale and lentil soup I'm making today is a great, nourishing combination of ingredients. It creates a soup that is deeply satisfying to eat. I serve the soup with a thick consistency in the Italian style. If you prefer the soup thinner, just add more stock to the lentils when cooking. And a drizzle of the very best olive oil is the perfect finishing touch, and the last-minute addition seems to elevate what is a rustic soup onto a more sophisticated platter. So kale and lentil soup, two robust ingredients which give a really lovely, earthy flavour to a soup. And I'm going to make this soup quite thick in the Italian style, if that's the way you want to describe it. And two processes to this recipe. One is the cooking of the lentils, and then we're going to cook the kale. The lentils take longer to cook than the kale, so we'll get those on cooking first. So I'm using these little green puy lentils, which I really, really love. You could use brown lentils as well. I think if you used orange lentils, the soup would be a very strange colour. Just in a saucepan, and some aromatic vegetables then to go with it. So an onion, which I'm going to cut in half. The onion will be taken out afterwards. This will not become part of the soup. It's just going to flavour the lentils. Whole cloves of garlic, skin on, and then a whole chilli. Then I'm using some chicken stock. You could use water or you could use vegetable stock, depending on what you like. Chicken stock will give a lovely flavour and, of course, will make the whole thing highly nutritious. Then a nice sprig of thyme, like that, and a bay leaf. Again, for more sort of deep, earthy flavours going in here. And these will take about 30 minutes or so to cook. I'll add in a pinch of salt at that stage. If you put the salt in now, it can toughen the lentils and cause the skins to come away from the little lentil seed itself, which isn't the end of the world, but preferable to avoid it. So those go on, bring them to a simmer, and then when they come to a simmer, turn the heat down and just keep them going at a simmer, because what you don't want to do is to evaporate and to lose your stock through steam. So just nice and gently, and we'll keep a good eye on those. They're cooking. While they're cooking, you can prepare your kale. Kale is a wonderful vegetable. Here I've got lovely curly kale, which of course everybody will be familiar with. And then this less familiar but nonetheless wonderful one called red Russian or raggedy kale. Either of these would be suitable. The only thing you have to do with the kale, by the way, before you cook it, is just remove the tough central rib there, because that's just not so good. And then you just simply pull that off the stalk like that, and it couldn't be easier. So into the boiling salted water, you'll find it, of course, it boils down or collapses down to quite a small amount. And this I will let boil quite fast, as distinct from the lentils, which we're just going to simmer. Okay, the kale is looking good. So what I do just to test to see it's cooked, and it's been cooking for about 5 or 6 minutes, just take a little bit and just pinch it, and it should feel nice and tender, which it does. So now we have to strain the kale. I can turn off the heat, and we're going to puree it. So into a food processor, or you could use a handheld blender here if you want. Okay, put all that in there. And it looks like a lot at this stage. Look, the colour is fantastic. So I had some salt in the water, so it's not really going to take very much more salt. Well, we'll taste it and see. Now I start off by blending the kale a little bit, and then I add in the cream. So pour that in, and this will help it to just break down to a beautiful creamy puree, which is just so lovely. There we go. It's pretty good at this stage. Needs another pinch of salt. And also I like to put a nice twist of black pepper in at this stage. One more little blend in. So that's that. You can have that prepared plenty of time ahead in advance, early on in the day even, if you wish. For us now, I'm just waiting for the lentils to cook, and then we're going to combine both and put them together. Okay, so the lentils should be cooked, so let's just have a little look. And they do need to be cooked through. So I can now retrieve some of the flavoring. So the onions come out. So you've got to do a little bit of fishing here. The chili, which by now has completely collapsed. The bay leaf. The sprig of thyme, which I'm going to just fish out like that. The little leaves will have fallen off. That's perfect. They'll be flavoring. And then remember, we had 3 fairly fat cloves of garlic in here. So all of that comes out. Just check I haven't left anything behind. No, not too disastrous. I have 2 halves of 1 onion. That seems correct. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just skin the chili. So I just cut off or pull off the little stalk off the top like that. And then just with a little knife, just cut down along the chili. It's hot. You don't have to do it immediately. You can allow this to cool if your hands are a little more sensitive than mine. Scrape it open like that. And then actually a really easy way to do this is just at this point, just scrape the seeds out nice and gently because we want the flesh, but we don't want the seeds. And just scrape the flesh off like that. The skin, I just find, is a little tough in the soup. The garlic, so just cut off the skin and look how fantastic that is. It's completely tender. So then just chop that to a puree. So this is sort of going to disappear into the soup. Yeah, that's absolutely lovely, that is. And I'm going to stir all of that in. Now, I need to taste the lentils. Flavour is really good, but they do need a pinch of salt. And also a little pepper, even though we have some chili heat in there. So remember, when I was starting to cook the lentils, I said not to put the salt in the beginning because it can toughen. So that's why we're putting the salt in now. So now we're ready to combine the kale and the lentils. So let's pop that in. So this is going to be quite thick, quite robust in texture and consistency. If you like it a bit thinner in your house, well then just add a little bit more chicken stock or vegetable stock, your stock of choice to it. Fold that in. So I suppose maybe in this country we might call this a kale and lentil stew, but this is the way they serve a lot of their soups in Italy. So thick that a spoon will almost stand up in them. And that is essentially that. But now you're ready to serve. So the soup served quite hot, not boiling hot, but nice and hot. I like to use an old-fashioned type soup bowl for this, but you use whatever you like. See, it really is quite thick, and make sure you've mixed the lentils through properly so that each serving gets the correct quantity. So I like to put a drizzle of extra virgin olive oil on, just last thing, just before it goes to the table, and the nicest olive oil you can manage. Not too much, but the sweet, grassy flavour of this olive oil, whoops, plenty. It's really delicious with this, and then the combination of flavours is really good. I think this is delicious soup. Duck and oranges are a classic combination of flavours, but here, the emphasis is on a lighter result rather than the rich sauce one normally expects. Peppery watercress, bitter red-leaved radicchio are a lively foil for the richness of the meat. A selection of salad leaves could replace the ones I have suggested, but including some bitter leaves makes all of the difference to the balanced flavour of the finished dish. The vinaigrette used to dress the salad leaves also serves as a sauce, and so the overall effect is refreshing. I like to serve a crisp potato dish to accompany, such as pomme allumette or rustic roasted potatoes. I'm going to get the potatoes in cooking first, and then when they're in the oven, we can concentrate on our duck for this recipe. So I've got lovely Irish potatoes, scrubbed, skin still on, and we're going to just roast these with the skin on. So I like to cut them into in half like that, and then ideally into wedges. So they'll sit on the tray like that, skin side down, and then that skin gets super crispy. If the potato is slightly bigger, I go to the center like that, and you still get a sort of a wedge where they sit like that. So there we go. The skin of the potato is where most of the nutritional value is actually, so leaving that on is clearly an advantage. All back into the bowl, and then just a little rosemary and garlic. 2 garlic cloves unpeeled like that, and what I sometimes do is just give a little press with my knife like that, and that will release some of the flavour without making the whole thing overly garlic. Even that one slightly less, perfect. Then the rosemary, which I just sort of pull off the spear like that. I mean, these are good enough to eat on their own with no meat or anything to go with them. And then some olive oil. So Don't overdo the olive oil here, and that's why I always mix this in a bowl, because I find if I put the beignets onto a tray, I will use more olive oil than I need. And I'm just going to get my hands in here. They just need to be lightly glazed. And very importantly, I'm not going to season these unusually at this stage, because if I put salt on them now, they're more likely to stick to the tray that I'm cooking them on. And the object of the exercise with roast potatoes, rustic roast potatoes in my case, is that you have a lovely crispy skin. So I just turn them all out onto the tray. See that there's no great deal of olive oil left over, so you're not wasting any of that. And then I like to just turn them so the skin sides are down, like that. The bits of rosemary get really lovely and crispy, so they're ready to go in. Pop those in, and they'll take about 30 minutes or so. Now, for our duck, I've got 2 lovely duck breasts, Irish free-range duck. This is a really beautiful quality. What's very important, though, before I cook the duck, is that I score the duck breasts so that the excess fat will leach out. Because what we want here is a lovely crispy skin. It doesn't really matter what pattern you use at this point, but what does matter is that you cut through the fat, just like that. So you see, I've actually cut through the skin out, and that allows the extra fat to run out. So it's really important to do that. Breaking most of the rules that we associate with cooking meat or poultry or fish or whatever it happens to be, we're going to put these straight onto a completely cold grill pan. Absolutely stone cold. Okay, so duck breasts unseasoned at this stage onto the entirely cold grill pan. And this is a fantastic way to cook duck, because as the heat comes up, it draws the excess fat, which you save, out of the duck skin, and you get super Christmas and really lovely colour. So, sort of medium heat to get us going. While they are cooking, I can prepare the other elements for the salad. So, I start off by zesting one of my oranges. So I'm going to use my microplane, just going fairly lightly to get that really deliciously scented, oily flavour of the orange. Now, for the vinaigrette, always measure accurately. I'm using, again, extra virgin olive oil and 3 tablespoons of this and 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. And the combination of lemon and orange together is fantastic. There we go. And of course, a nice pinch of salt and pepper. Give that a little whisk. That's already looking lovely. So this is going to dress the salad leaves. It's also really the sauce for this dish.
Get closer to your cooking with Neff, Slide and Hide, proud sponsor of How to Cook Well with Rory O'Connell.
Okay, that's lovely, that's perfect. So now I need to segment my oranges. So the orange that I zested, so I begin by cutting a little strip off the top of the orange, just until you can see into the flesh, like that. And the same at the bottom end, the other end, like that. And I'm going to run my knife just along and above the white line of pith there. The object of the exercise here is to remove all of the pith, so we just have beautiful orange segments at the end. So just keep going like that. And this may look extravagant, but actually I find that this is the most economical way in reality to move the rind from the orange. That's pretty much that. And now we are ready to remove the segments. The first segment I usually am going to cut in there, like that, and it pops out, and you get a perfect rind-free membrane of orange. Just push, sort of teasing, but they come away really nicely and cleanly. Again, if they break up a little bit on you, it's not the end of the world, but they do look so beautiful, and they're sort of quite pleasing, not only to look at, but actually somewhat more pleasing in a way to eat. Squeeze in any of the juice that remains in the bulk of the membrane. Now I'm going to pop those in there and give them a little stir, and the oil will protect them and prevent them from tasting oxidized. So that's one of the reasons why it's absolutely fine to do that up earlier on in the day. Okay, let's look back at the duck and see what's happening. Yeah, let's see, we've got that beautiful hazelnutty mahogany color, really crispy skin. So that's now ready to turn. So I think our duck is cooked. So let's just test and see how it is. A slight little give when you press it. So at that stage, then take it off and turn off our heat, and then pop it on to an arrangement like this. So I've got a saucer sitting on a plate. Any juice that comes out of the duck will be saved. It'll run underneath the saucer. And then it also means that when you do this, when the duck is resting, and this duck will benefit from at least 10 minutes resting, even up to a half an hour, it won't be sitting in its own juices then when you do it like this. So I'm going to put that into an oven at between 50 and 80 degrees just to keep warm. Okay, that's those. They'll rest very happily there. And while they're resting, I'm going to prepare the salad. We have our washed and dried watercress leaves and radicchio. I mean, it's so beautiful. It's such a lovely combination. So I'm going to take some of the dressing. So give this a little stir. The oranges have been protected by the oil. Put just enough dressing onto the leaves. Like that. But in fact, put slightly less than you think you need. You can always add a little bit more in. And then I love a really nice big bowl for dressing salad leaves because you have plenty of space. That should sit up quite nicely due to the nature of the leaves. Last couple of little ones in there. Now let's have a look at our potatoes because I think they're pretty much ready as well. So we're looking for lovely crispness and colour here. Remember, we didn't put any seasoning on, no salt on at the beginning because I said the salt causes them to stick. Then you don't get a lovely crispy skin like that. So a little bit of salt, and they would be perfect just like that. But what I'm going to do for this particular dish is put a little butter in and then a few little drops of balsamic vinegar. Potatoes and vinegar is like vinegar at the chip shop. It's fantastic. Just turn the butter into the potatoes. See the way they get slightly glazed? I love those bits of roasted rosemary. I'm leaving the bits of garlic skin for atmospheric visuals, if you like. Some people will want to eat those. And they just slide off nice and easily, like that. Pull a little bit of fresh rosemary on just to freshen it up. So we're ready to carve our duck, assemble our salad, and take it to the table. I prefer the duck when it's sort of slightly pink rather than rare. So pop them in. You can get them to sort of sit up a little bit, all the better. Our orange segments, like that. So, as I say, a classic combination of flavours. Any little bit of juice that's come out of the duck while it's been cooking, that will be delicious. So I like to pour that pretty much onto the duck pieces. So straight to the table with that. The lovely crispy, sort of slightly bitter, slightly peppery leaves, refreshing oranges, and also crispy potatoes and rosemary. Delicious. Is rice pudding the Marmite of puddings? You either love it or hate it. Personally, I love this combination of flavours, and it elevates the humble rice pudding to a higher plane. The cherry compote is best cooked plenty of time ahead to allow the cherries to swell and soften and the juices to become syrupy and somewhat concentrated. I usually cook the cherries on the previous evening, but cooked first thing in the morning to serve that evening, they will also yield a lovely result. The pudding is best served warm with softly whipped cream to accompany. The preparation time here is short, but do allow the rice the suggested length of time to cook to a creamy consistency. So I'm going to get the milk on for the rice pudding. I just need to bring this to the boil. And while that is coming to the boil, then we can make our sour cherry compote and so on. I like to use full fat milk for this. You can use milk with less fat if that's what you like. I like the richness that the full fat milk gives to the rice pudding. So while that's coming to the boil set, I'm going to make this little compote which I'm going to serve with the pudding. So I've got very simply some sour cherries. These are dried sour cherries. And like apples, you have bitter apples and sweet apples. Cherries are the same thing, and the same could be said for oranges or pomegranates. You know, depending on the different fruits, some of them are sweet according to variety, and some of them are sour, and these are sour, and they are really delicious. So I'm going to make this very, very simple little compote. Pop those into a saucepan. These are really to get now. They're sort of everywhere. Some people like to put them into their muesli or granola or even into an ordinary bowl of porridge for breakfast. So they go into a saucepan with some orange juice. And orange and cherry is really, really good together. And then just a small amount of sugar just to sweeten them up. And I bring this up to a simmer and then ideally leave that overnight. So I've got one made ahead for tasting later on. But ideally leave that overnight. It just comes up to a simmer and sits. And what happens is, overnight, is that the cherries soak up some of the sweetness of the sugar, obviously, and also the colour, the natural colour, stains the orange juice, but in a very nice way. Give it a little stir if you want to. Okay, that's just going to come to a simmer. I mean, it couldn't be much easier than that, could it? And speaking of easy, the rice pudding itself, it is utter simplicity. So I've got my rice, as you'd expect, and I'm using arborio rice, which you'd normally think about when you're making a risotto, but I like the slightly luscious consistency that the arborio rice brings to this particular pudding. So that just goes straight in, this sort of seems unlikely, straight into the bowl with the coconut, a little bit of sugar, just to sweeten, a little bit of butter, because we love butter, just to add a little bit of richness, and then just a small little drop of vanilla. And it seems really strange to put those ingredients dry into the serving dish. Just give that a stir around. Don't be too worried about anything here. In fact, there's virtually nothing to worry about. When the milk comes to the boil, we're just going to pour it over that, give it another little stir, and then it goes into our oven for about an hour and a half. Back over here, the compote has just come to a simmer, and that's it. Don't think you have to reduce the liquid or boil it down or anything at this stage. You don't. Just to a simmer. If some of the cherries, as they sometimes do, stick together like that, the little dried cherries, just sort of push them apart with a spoon, and they'll be perfect. Great, that's lovely. Ooh, look, my milk's just come to the boil. Make sure your milk doesn't boil over. It makes, as you know, the most awful mess. So literally, just pour this straight in on top of the dry ingredients, like that. And then I usually give it a little stir. If there's a little skin on the milk, that's fine. We leave that behind. We don't particularly want that. Just give it another little stir. You don't need a big spoon to do this, just to make sure all of the flavourings and ingredients are evenly distributed. Great, that's ready for the oven. So this is the point that if your oven has a steam function, this will be ideal here because it creates a lovely steamy atmosphere for the rice pudding, which it loves. So pop that in. That's going to take about an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours, slightly depends on the rice that you're using. So it's going to be a beautiful creamy consistency. And in here, we have one which should be just at the right point. Okay, that is looking perfect. Great. Now, the lovely hot rice, the cherries which have taken on the colour, or the juice rather, which has taken on the colour of the cherry. So the orange juice has now become this lovely syrupy looking cherry juice. So the skin, there can be a discussion in your house about whether you like the skin or not. I usually just pull back the skin. Some people would love that there, and then that's really lovely. That's exactly the right stage. The milk is just evaporated. Then some softly whipped cream, or not, as the case may be. I love the cold and the hot together. And then some of the compote of cherries, just on top, a little more of that juice. A simple and heavenly thing.
Get closer to your cooking with Neff Slide and Hide, proud sponsor of How to Cook Well with Rory O'Connell.